Okay, so as promised, I'm going to be talking about Peter today, what happened that week that I lost my milk. First of all, one thing I forgot to mention yesterday is James started a new job, and so that's been a major change for us. I knew there was more, I just couldn't think of it last night. James had been working for the same agency for almost 8 years, and he just changed jobs to work more towards his licensure for what his master's is in. He has a master's in social work, and he wants to be a therapist. And so he is now working toward that. He works farther away from home than he used to. His old office used to be about 10-15 minutes from our house. Now he works about 30 to 40 minutes away. And so that's been rough. And also his hours are a lot different. His old job was a little bit more flexible than this one. And so he only gets home about 10-15 minutes before I have to go to work in the evenings, rather than he would get home probably like 45 minutes to an hour before I had to go to work. And so now we don't really see each other very much. We kind of just like see each other in passing. And so that's been another big adjustment for us. But anyway, moving on. Okay, so that first week, it was September 30th to October 4th, or October 3rd, whatever that Monday through Friday is. But September 30th, we took Peter to school as normal. When he got out of the car, he kind of made this like, ow noise, like when he landed on his feet. I didn't think anything of it. He walked into school just fine. You know, we went on about our day. Killian had an appointment with his new pediatrician, the new pediatrician we were trying out. And so we did that with Killian earlier that day. I'm trying to think if I'd worked. I think I'd worked the night before. So I was tired, to say the least. Right before I picked Peter up, I got a phone call from the daycare saying that he was refusing to walk on his right foot, and that it was hurting really bad, and it was a little bit swollen. They didn't think it looked broken or anything, but they weren't sure, because they said he was limping on the way to the car on the way to the daycare bus from school. When the daycare questioned the school about it, they didn't say anything. When I called the school about it, they didn't remember anything that had happened. They said that he never told anyone. He never, he didn't seem to hurt it during recess. It just seemed to get progressively worse throughout the day. I picked him up from daycare. He was refusing to walk on it. And so I had to pick him up. He's a large child. He's a very large child. So I had to pick him up, carry him to the car. We took him home. In a way, and this is horrible, and my mom was like this with me, I just thought he was faking. Like, I thought he was just making a bigger deal out of it than it actually was. We thought, he was just doing it just to get carried around and to get this sympathy. Well, then we started looking at it, and it was looking a little bit more bruised, and it was looking a little bit more swollen. So then I told my husband, I was like, well, I'll just take him to like the little 8 to 8 clinic down the street. They have an x-ray machine, and they can x-ray it and tell us it's not broken and just send us home. Well, I took him, they x-rayed it, and they said they weren't quite sure. It didn't really look like a break. It looked maybe like a growth plate shift, but they weren't sure. And I guess I didn't know that kids have growth plates in their bones. If you know this, then, ignore this next statement. But kids have growth plates in their bones. When their bones grow, they can shift. And so that's what they thought had happened. They decided they'd put it in a boot just in case, and we'd make an appointment with a pediatric orthopedic doctor for later on in the week. As they tried to put him on in the boot, he was screaming bloody murder. He wouldn't let anybody touch his foot or his ankle or his lower leg at all. Nobody could touch it. And the more he screamed, the doctor came in and said, as much as he's writhing in pain, he probably needs to go to the ER at this point. He said, tendons, things like that don't show up on an x-ray. And I'm almost thinking he's like ruptured his Achilles or he's done something like that. And we were like, oh my gosh, like, are you serious? And so we pack him up, go to the ER. It's like 8 o'clock at night at this point, 7 o'clock. We hadn't eaten dinner yet. Peter hadn't eaten dinner. I think James had fed Killian while I was at the doctor. Well, I called James. I didn't want to take him to the doctor by myself just because I was worried about that. So I called James and I say, we need to go take Peter to the emergency room. Can you call your parents? I'm going to call my mom. We can see who can watch him while we go do this. We ended up, I think my sister came over for a little while until my mom could get there to stay with Killian, and we took Peter to the ER. We waited forever. They took us back for more x-rays because they said the x-rays that came from Access Medical Center weren't very good. And so we went back for more x-rays. Then we went back out to the waiting room. And the more they questioned it, James worked in child welfare for several years, and it freaked him out that Peter was hurt and we couldn't explain why. And he always talked about that, that's horrible red flags for when, parents bring their kids into the ER and they've got a broken bone and they can't explain it. And I just kept saying that, he was fine when we dropped him off at school. Like, this is something that had to have happened at school. And so he was freaking out because everybody we talked to, the triage nurse, the check-in person, the doctor, we actually never saw a doctor. We'll get to that later. The PA, everybody we talked to, what happened? Well, we don't know. And it was hard to explain it because I was like, well, he got out of the car this morning and he kind of said, ow, but I'm not sure if that was it, or we're just not really sure what happened. We know that when we dropped him off at school, he was fine. When we picked him up at school, he was not. They, look at the x-rays. They send the x-rays off to a radiologist. Well, the PA walks in and says, it's broken. And we're like, what? And they're like, yeah, he broke his fibula. And so, we need to put him in a splint, and you guys need to see an orthopedic surgeon next week. And we're like, next week? We can't wait a week, with him in this, temporary splint. We need to see an orthopedic surgeon now. And they said, well, he needs to see his general doctor, and then he needs to see an orthopedic surgeon. And so then after arguing with them for a while, we just say, we're just going to make an appointment with the orthopedic doctor and see what happens. So we go home with a temporary splint. They didn't give us any crutches because they said he was too small for crutches and they didn't have any crutches that fit him. They wouldn't give us any type of wheelchair or anything. So we were having to carry him. He was not allowed to put any weight on that foot at all. And like I said, we never saw a doctor at the ER. We had a nurse and we had the PA, and we never saw a physician our entire time there. So anyway, so they sent us home with this splint, and I'll show you a picture of that here or somewhere in the screen. I took a picture and posted it on my Instagram account, and with the caption "First broken bone" because we didn't know at the time. We actually thought it was broken. Well, the next day, I keep both boys by myself. I wasn't able to call in, and so I kept both the boys all day Tuesday, and Peter wasn't able to walk, so I had to carry him to the bathroom, carry him everywhere, carry him to bed, carry him, so we basically just had him holed up on the couch the entire day, and we couldn't get in to see the orthopedic doctor until the next day. So I took care of Peter and Killian, cooked dinner, did all that, went to work that night, worked all night, and then, we didn't get home from the emergency room till 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 or 1:30. It was insane. And so we didn't sleep very much that night. And then had Peter all day. Then I worked all night Tuesday. And then we take Peter to the orthopedic doctor on Wednesday. The orthopedic doctor comes in and shows us the x-rays and says, it's not broken. He thinks, there may be a growth plate shift, which is what the Access Medical Center said in the first place. But from what he could tell, there wasn't anything wrong with his x-ray. He doesn't know why they told us it was broken. He doesn't know why they put him in a splint. He could tell that he was in pain, and there was definite bruising. We took one picture of it, but I'll post that in a minute after I tell you what we found out happened. But there was bruising around his ankle and on his foot. But other than that, the doctor said that, he might have just sprained it really bad. And so they put him in a walking boot. And Peter did say the walking boot helped him a little bit. He was able to walk a little bit. But he said, go ahead and have him miss school again. So they put him in the walking boot and sent us home. Well, James and I were like, well, now what do we do? Because it just seemed like we weren't getting any answers. Well, then, fast forward to, then Wednesday night I lost all my milk. And I'd had maybe 5 hours of sleep in the last 3 days. So then Wednesday night, that's when I lost all my milk. And so then Thursday, I do the same thing again. I keep both of them all day. And then in the middle of Thursday, his left foot started doing the same thing as his right foot. It got really bruised. He was refusing to walk on it. He said that it hurt really bad. And so now both legs he was refusing to walk on. And then he started throwing up. Peter has really bad acid reflux. And when he gets nervous or when he gets really upset, he starts throwing up almost every single meal. And so I was trying to keep him really non-acidic foods, just really bland foods, feed him that. Oh, I should also mention, I'm sorry, Peter had a cough for 2 to 3 weeks leading up to this. This is important. And I was just giving him Mucinex. He was never running a fever. There was never really a problem with it. He was just coughing. Anyway, well then he was still coughing. He was throwing up. Now his left foot was acting up. I called the orthopedic doctor and I was like, okay, now his left foot is bruised and it had this weird rash on it, these weird bumps. And then after looking at it, I realized that those same bumps were on his right foot. They just weren't as much. And now I'll show you the picture that I took. It's not a very good one, but you can kind of see the bruising on his ankle and these little red bumps kind of scattered around there. Well, I talked to the orthopedic nurse on the phone. She said, well, sometimes, because they're overworking the other foot, that can get bruised. And so maybe that's what's happening. That just didn't seem like the case to me. But I was like, okay, fine. I go to work Thursday night. So I was up again for 24 hours. I come home Friday morning and James was like, Peter threw up all night. He was coughing all night. He can't walk. I'm just not. I think he needs to go to the doctor again. So then we call the new pediatrician. She had not seen Peter yet. She'd only seen Killian. And I was worried that they wouldn't accept him that quickly if he wasn't an established patient. Luckily for us, they got us in that morning. We set him down and she came in and instantly knew what the problem was. Looked at his feet, felt the bumps and said, oh, I know exactly what this is. This is henoch-schonlein purpura, or HSP. HSP is an autoimmune response to an infection, typically in the lungs. This is making me sound like an awesome respiratory therapist right now. So he got an infection in his lungs that caused an autoimmune response that it ruptures the capillaries in your lower extremities. So that's what the bruising was. And it has this rash and it'll slowly work its way up to your trunk. She said it usually doesn't go above the trunk. But the scary thing about HSP is it can cause kidney failure if it's not caught early enough or if it's very severe. His wasn't very severe, but the fact that we just let it develop and if it would have kept developing and nobody would have caught it, his kidneys could have really been affected. And so that was a little bit scary. So they checked his urine, checked his blood pressure, and everything looked fine. They gave him a couple of breathing treatments. They put him on antibiotics for the infection, and it went away. And it was just, it floored me that could have been fixed on Monday. They could have looked at him and said, because we told him that he had a cough. We told him, and those little bumps were there. Yes, they weren't as pronounced, but those little bumps were there on Monday. And the fact that, there was no broken bone on his x-ray. And, and I was just really upset that they didn't catch it in the ER while we were there. And then that made me really mad that we never really saw a doctor. I know PAs are excellent and they're a great asset to the medical field, but we really probably needed to see a doctor that day. We had to go in for blood pressure checks and urine checks for him every other week for 6 weeks, I think. We kept having to go back because she said even though the infection may go away, they still may go into kidney failure without any warning. Well, now every time he gets a lung infection, I freak out because I'm worried that this is going to happen again. But now I'm a little bit more vigilant. I know what to look for, and we definitely won't let it go that long again. So if your child ever has an extended cough and then they start to develop bruising and swelling in their ankles and their feet, and then they get this weird rash that goes up their legs, then you may want to get them checked for HSP. So that was our little experience with HSP. Luckily, it wasn't as bad. After we found out what it was, I Googled it, and it was horrible what I saw, what some people have dealt with. So his case was extremely mild comparatively, but still scary nonetheless, just because we didn't know what was going on. But anyway, that's all for today. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye-bye.